All right, well, I am very pleased to be here today to talk about some of my master's work. So this was done under Dr. Monique Perez-Garcia at Ohio State, hence the Ohio State theme. However, as said, I am now at North Carolina State University. So let's get started. So as we all know, animal welfare has become increasingly important to the consumer. So anything from the new marketing programs we see to just social media posts, people are more concerned about animal welfare. And that encompasses many different things, right? So we think about housing, we can think about handling, but one thing that often gets overlooked is euthanasia. And euthanasia, unfortunately, is not a pleasant experience for anyone, but it is a really useful tool that we have to end pain and suffering when recovery is no longer possible or it'd be prolonged. And so it's a compassionate way that we can intervene in the pig's life in a positive way. So did I skip this one? Okay. So when we think about timely euthanasia, it really comes down to the timeline of not euthanizing the pig too early and not doing it too late. This becomes the real challenge for most producers and caretakers, trying to determine the severity of the injury, how long the pig has been injured, especially in cases where it's grouped healths, and you may not have seen that pig every single day, and then determining what the potential for recovery may be. This can often be complicated by the fact that our caretakers are not veterinarians, and so it's just a matter of not having as much experience in that specific area. So using what knowledge they have and the background history on the animal to make an informed decision. So if we euthanize a pig too soon, we risk losing the economic inputs into that animal and potentially euthanizing it before it has been given an adequate time to heal. However, if we're too late, we risk welfare concerns with allowing that pig to live too long. And so we're really looking for that timely or the most ideal time to end the life when recovery would be prolonged. So what really matters to us as producers is the potential risk of having public scrutiny associated with undercover videos. So unfortunately, these are a reality, and not just the swine industry, but all animal agriculture. And they are in response to consumers' demands for more transparency. These videos, they show a lot of things. Often it's painful procedures like tail docking, needle teeth clipping, improper handling or abuse, housing issues, especially gestation stalls. But one of the big things that we can really target are the sick and injured pigs. So the ones that are kept on farm too long and should have been euthanized earlier. This is an area where we can directly make a difference and in helping our caretakers learn when to euthanize in a more timely manner. So as many of you know, the Euthanasia Guidelines currently available in the U.S. include the Pork Quality Assurance Plus program, the On-Farm Euthanasia of Swine booklet, which I believe you might have just been handed out. It's a great resource. And then since 2014, the Common Swine Industry Audit has increasingly governed the swine industry and allowed producers to really access the markets if they want to market their animals. So if we look a little closer at the 2018 CSIA, they have 5 criteria within which are some subparts for when pigs need to be euthanized. Outside of these 5 criteria, there's a bit more leeway, and it is up to the caretaker and the producer to make an informed decision with the veterinarian perhaps for specific animals. However, these criteria mainly deal with those animals which have no potential for recovery. So for example, pigs which haven't improved after 2 days of care, non-ambulatory pigs, especially those with a body condition score of 1. The hernias category has been interesting. It's kind of evolved over time. And now we're a bit more detailed than it was in its original iteration. But now we talk about perforated hernias, those that are ulcerated and necrotic, and those which touch the ground, impede movement, and are ulcerated. And then same thing with the prolapses, that's also evolved over time. So now we have uterine prolapses or those that are necrotic. So any pig on the farm, when the auditor is there that meets these criteria, is a potential issue. So say what happens if that occurs? The auditor's on the farm and sees one of those pigs. Unfortunately, it's an automatic audit failure, right? So right then, everything else on the farm could be great and perfect. You have this one issue and you're automatically failed. There are 5 criteria in the CSIA that can potentially fail you. One of which is the abuse and neglect here we see at the top, then whether animals are euthanized in a timely manner, and the last 3 criteria relate to confirming death or performing euthanasia correctly. So if we think about all these things together, failing to euthanize any animal, or a pig in this case, in a timely manner, you're going to have an automatic audit failure if this so happens to occur when you have a CSIA audit. You're going to have increased risk of poor public perception, and then you're going to have unnecessary animal pain and suffering. Right? So these can lead to loss of market access, loss of money, loss of consumer trust, loss of people who are willing to purchase your product, and then poor swine welfare. So recognizing all these things, right now, the industry is really recognizing that this is a big issue. So we're setting the goal of improving timely euthanasia. We're making the plan with the CSIA and kind of getting those guidelines and training programs up and going. And we're kind of in this process of building up the staircase, hopefully to reach our goal of having no instances of untimely euthanasia. So, knowing all this, what my highlighted master's project focused on was developing an interactive training program, which is called On-Farm Swine Euthanasia Making Timely Decisions. It is a novel program which has not really been, the format has not really been used previously in any animal agriculture sector, but specifically in pigs. And so we have also published this. It's not in print yet, but it is online. The 3 main goals of this project are to, overall, reduce the number of timely euthanasia failures. But we're really focused on improving caretakers' ability to recognize the compromised pigs. So that's the first step. If the caretakers aren't able to identify the pigs, there's really no hope going forward. Once we see the compromised pigs, we wanted them to know where the euthanasia endpoints are. And then lastly is kind of the big framework picture behind it. We want to improve their understanding of the CSIA guidelines because we said it's a very predominant document within the industry now that really dictates a lot of decision making. So unlike traditional classroom learning, multimedia presentations and learning styles have been shown to have a lot of advantages, especially for the adult learner. So unlike the didactic kind of training that even veterinary students like myself have, where we sit in classrooms and hear lectures all day, that might not be the best way to train those, especially for jobs where they're going out and doing active hands-on activities, as opposed to just kind of knowledge generation. So multimedia programming in a lot of different fields, medical fields, veterinary fields, computer fields, the research has shown that it improves clinical decision-making, which is great from our perspective, promotes greater satisfaction. So if our caretakers are more invested in that program and more interested, they're more likely to take away more information, enhanced credibility of the material, and then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, is improving information retention. As a lot of us have experienced in our own schooling, we can learn everything, cram it all in, take a test, and then dump it out. That's not what we want for our caretakers because this is a lifelong skill and something that really is going to impact the farm. So we specifically wanted to focus on a case study design. Case studies have been defined several different ways, but they're generally a story or a way of studying a topic that brings up specific points for analysis. So instead of just presenting those specific points, it provides an example framework that may make it more relatable to the caretaker or to whatever learner to kind of relate that to their own life. So it takes advantage of the caretaker's past knowledge that they've already generated from working on the farm and also allows them to be more self-directed learners, which is kind of, it works with the adult learning style, which has been studied extensively, and I left out all that to save you, but it's much different than what we consider for the youth or the growing up learning style. So I would like to take a brief look here and kind of show you some of the details of the program. Okay, so hopefully our audio will work.
Welcome to the On-Farm Swine Euthanasia Making Timely Decisions training program. This program is designed to help you, as a pig caretaker, learn how to evaluate sick and injured pigs and make timely and humane euthanasia decisions. Before you begin, let's take a tour of the program. Click on the orange buttons to choose your stage of production, then to choose the case study you wish to complete. Use the next and the back buttons to navigate through the case studies. Click the replay button if you wish to watch a video or hear audio again. Hover over the question mark icon for key terms and a link to view the glossary. To enlarge images, click on the magnifying glass icon. Click on the orange text to select an answer choice. In any point in the module, hover over the Options tab for quick access links. To watch this video again, select Welcome. To choose a different stage of production, select Menu. To browse the glossary, select Glossary. At the end of each case study, follow the instructions to generate your certificate. Now you're ready to start. Click Next to continue.
So this is the intro video that is the first thing that a learner would see when they start to use the program. Let's jump back in. Okay, so the overall design of the program has the start page. So, is that the pointer? Oh yeah, there we go. All right, so the start. Below that, you have an option to select one of three production stages. So we have breeding stock, piglets, and wean to grow finisher pigs. This allows caretakers from all different types of farms to gain experience from these modules. Then within each production stage, we have 5 case studies. Each of those has a lot of series of questions that will go into a bit more detail. And then as we saw, there's an options tab available at all times to the user. They can go back to the welcome page, jump to the menu to select a different stage of production, or go to the glossary, which I'll also highlight here in a little bit. So looking more closely at an individual case study, you select one and that excludes all the others for the time being. We automatically start with providing a video or photo. Again, we're trying to mimic the caretaker's daily responsibilities, which is a very visual task and a very visual job. So we start with providing that visual experience for them. They'll have a variable number of those videos or photos depending on the case study. Some are very straightforward, and we want to really hammer home the point that you don't need to, evaluate this animal for much longer if it has a severely ulcerated hernia and there's intestines falling out. We don't need to emphasize the fact you need to keep looking at this animal. It's obvious from the first glance what needs to be done. After those multiple photos or videos, we have a set of management options. These will always include at least 3 options, and sometimes more. And they include variations on do not intervening in the pig's care, so kind of a step back, watch the animal, just see how they do. A euthanize immediately option, and one that provides treatment. So what is really important for our program is that it's not prescriptive with regards to what treatment you will provide. We are only using the CSIA guidelines as the foundation for the euthanasia criteria because we don't want to make a suggestion that would necessarily go against a farm's individual SOPs or a farm's veterinary recommendations. We recognize there's a lot of variability in swine farms in the U.S., and so we're just saying treat the animal, so provide medication or maybe move it to a hospital pen or get a second recommendation. We're not saying give penicillin 5 cc's every day for 3 days. After each option, which is really unique, we provide feedback. So we're helping the learner make the connection between why they chose a certain option and what the outcome would be if they had chosen that. So they really get to be active in the process and make actual decisions. If they don't answer correctly, sometimes and often there are more than one correct answer, and the program does tell you this. But if they do not answer correctly, it explains why the answer's wrong, which is really helpful to help complete the learning process and understand why something is not a preferred option. At the end, there's a certificate of completion for each individual case study as well. Oh, look, we're identifying the compromised pigs. We're making other observations. Again, something else to note is that the other observations in the photo and video can be layered in. So they might have a photo video provide information about that pig. More photos, maybe a few days later, here's another photo of how the case has progressed. So it's not just a static one point in time in all cases. Okay, so I'd like to show you a few of the specific details that helps make this program unique. One thing that we really liked is providing the same type of contextual similarity to what the caretaker would actually experience. So instead of providing a picture from the other side of the barn, looking towards a specific sow in gestation, we know that caretakers are walking up the front and back alleys, and so that's what we wanted to mimic when we provided the photos and videos. So this is an example from one of our case studies. I was literally walking with a video camera, collecting this data. The idea here is to simulate what the caretaker would be doing and to hopefully have them recognize a pig in there, which hopefully some of you might have recognized, might need a bit more attention. We don't want to make it so easy that we take a picture of the one pig and say, is this pig okay? Because that's not how the caretaker would approach their daily duties. So we also sought to use colloquialisms or kind of slang terms that the industry would use or that are not necessarily scientifically correct. So instead of saying in this case the dorsal spinous processes, we're going to say the backbone. Instead of saying the tuber ischium, we're going to say the hip bones. It just helps make it more relatable to the caretaker and allows them to not feel so I can just make it like more relatable and so that they understand there's not that language barrier that's preventing understanding. So in this case, we're asking about body condition, and we want to emphasize that when you look at body condition, look for these specific points on the pig to help you assess their state. Another thing that's really important is with the timeliness of euthanasia, we need to really focus on the time schedule. So a lot of the criteria have to do with no improvement after, for example, 2 days. So if we provide information and say, this pig is really ill, and then we say later, oh, the pig is doing better, we need to have a clear timeline so that the caretaker can make an informed decision about how the treatment should progress or whether or not euthanasia is important. So in this case, we have a Monday 8 a.m., later that day, we have more information about how the case has changed. And then the next morning, we provide even more information. We also provide evaluation history. This is important to help emphasize the importance of record keeping. So that is a big part of any good SOPs on farms, but especially with the CSIA, is documenting what you're seeing and what you're doing to the pig, if you do anything. So here, this is a fake sow card, and it says that all the piglets are healthy, except on day 7, we might have noted something wrong with this piglet. This specific case had a laceration above one of the claws, and so we monitored this piglet, and on day 12, we noted it's healed. So we're providing that feedback to the user that you need to keep track of these things to help with the timeliness aspect and the timing of euthanasia. We also like to develop observational skills. So in addition to that contextual similarity, we're asking users to pick out a sick pig in a group situation as opposed to individual gestation stalls. And instead of just asking which pig needs to be looked at, we might say, this pig is clearly not doing as well as its pinmates. Why? And so we're asking them to make more of an analysis of the situation and kind of think through why that pig might need to be looked at further. Case studies, overall, with all these different facets together, they help the user take those skills straight from training to their job. This is so great for swine farms because as the pool of potential employees is increasingly limited, we need the employees to be able to move quickly from the training to the actual working process. As I said previously, we're not using prescriptive feedback. So at this particular example, we're saying the pig is lame, but he's still able to stand. So we're stating a fact about this specific case. Then we say you should work with your veterinarian or farm manager to develop a treatment plan. So again, we're not saying you should do anything specific, just think about maybe a treatment plan for this pig. However, we do provide a recommendation that we think is fairly acceptable across the industry. Maybe it might help to separate him into a hospital pen. And why that's important is because it can reduce competition for feed and water and prevent injury from other pen mates. So we're providing a fact. We're saying maybe you should work with someone to address this issue. Here's a recommendation, and here's why the recommendation is useful. As I also noted, we have flexible responses. So in some cases, we recognize that maybe in this case, euthanasia is not necessary at this point. Maybe you want to just wait and monitor the pig. Maybe you want to provide treatment. So originally, when we were designing this, we had, if they chose, for example, treat the pig, and they selected that option, it wouldn't provide an opportunity for them to go back. And we realized that was actually limiting the user's understanding that there might be more than one correct way to approach a specific case. And so once the user has selected one specific correct answer, they're directed back so that they can see that there are other correct responses as well. So let's take a look at this case. This is the option page. The user has been given information about these specific pigs and is asking the user what they want to do. So again, we have two treatment options in this case. We can give a shot of iron. Specifically, we were talking about this pig being anemic. Or we can move the piglet to the sow. We're not intervening, or we're just continue to monitor the piglet, or we're going to euthanize immediately. So again, we have at least three options, one of which is euthanasia, one is which is not intervening, and then the other is providing care. In this specific case, you don't have the other information, but we decided that euthanasia was necessary for this piglet. What is unique about our program is we include visual reinforcers in addition to the text. So instead of just having the information that says this is the correct or appropriate decision, we're also showing them by a green check mark. If it's incorrect, we'll have a red X. So again, using multiple modalities to reach the user. We also have the question mark sign anytime we have a link to a glossary term. So again, we don't want to inhibit learning by having language that's not understood. So in this case, we're talking about non-ambulatory. And so when you hover over that question mark, it's automatically going to take you to the term that is on that slide that may not be understood. You can also anytime access the glossary through the top options tab here. Okay, so we have some time, so I'd like to take you through a couple, one or two case studies and kind of give you more of an in-depth appreciation for the different unique aspects of the program. So we're going to go on the piglets. We're going to go to case study 3.
While walking down the farrowing room, you stop and look at a litter of one of your first parity sows. Her piglets are a week old, and you want to make sure they are all doing well.
Again, we always provide the option to replay. That kind of started abruptly, and if you don't realize that there's going to be audio and association, you might miss a part of that. So you can always replay it. You can always go back and forward as well.
Looking more closely, you see one piglet which is smaller than its penmates.
Again, we're highlighting the fact that there is a compromised pig in this pen, and we're telling the user why we think this piglet's a bit different. So we're saying it's a bit smaller.
Let's watch the video again. This time, can you identify the piglet that's smaller than its penmates?
So here, in asking the user to participate in the decision and say, can you identify them, we're hoping that they'll take a more active role in the learning process. And we're also providing the actual circle around the pig we want to highlight in case it was not clear to the user.
The piglet is completely unresponsive, showing no interest in nursing or responding to his penmates. After looking closer, you see the piglet has a severe injury where the intestines have come out of the castration incision. The intestines are necrotic and dry.
In this case, if the user didn't know what necrotic meant, they can go up to the question mark and automatically links here, and you can go to the glossary for more information. So as we've seen, we're kind of breaking up the chunks of information. We didn't provide all of this on one slide to prevent it from being so overwhelming. We gave a bit of information that kind of piqued the user's interest. Then we gave a bit more information that says, this is why this pig might be, you might need to look at him. And then we're hitting you with, this is what the issue is.
When you try to put the piglet on his feet, he immediately falls down and does not try to stand or walk. This means he is non-ambulatory. What do you want to do?
So here's the critical point where we're asking the user how are they going to address the situation. So let's, for example, say we want to continue to monitor this piglet. Here we see the red X saying this is not appropriate, and we give a reason. This is so important because as a learner, you need to know why your reasoning was wrong to learn anything from your decision. So in this case, we're saying the piglet's injury is severe and necrotic. Again, you can go up here and learn both what necrotic and non-ambulatory mean. And he has a poor likelihood of recovery. So you're going to be directed back. If we choose treat the piglet, we have the same response. We would have the same response for repair the injury. And eventually, if the user goes through all others and they finally get to euthanize, we have the same reasoning why this piglet should be euthanized. And we're reinforcing the fact that euthanasia is a compassionate choice. We want to recognize that it is a difficult choice, but that it is right for the piglet in this case. At the end of the case study, you are directed to create your own certificate with your name and date. Very handy. You're taken back to the main screen where you can choose other case studies or go back, as we will do now. So we'll go into the wean and grow finisher pigs. Let's jump to case study 4.
The sow farm, which supplies your nursery pigs, is recovering from a disease outbreak. They tell you that some of the sickest piglets lost weight and were euthanized on farm. They also tell you that some of the weaned pigs transported to your farm had poor body conditions and were weak.
So we're setting the scene here. In this case, we're giving a bit of background information from the previous farm. This is the only case that actually does that, but it represents a real situation where a nursery might get a new load of pigs and not have much information about them aside from what they were told.
Knowing that some of these pigs started out sick, you have made it a priority to carefully observe and monitor for any pig showing signs of illness.
This is probably one of my favorite case studies just because of how unique this interactive part is. So we've frozen the image, and you can hover over the highlighted pigs. And so we've picked the 4 total, 3 distractors, and then 1 pig that looks maybe not so great. And so here we're saying, okay, caretaker, you're presented with this pen of pigs. Which one looks maybe not doing so well? So if we selected one, it'll say incorrect, try again. Eventually you'll work your way through, you'll get to this guy. Only after you've selected this correct pig can you continue. So now that we've identified this specific pig, and we have just this brief snapshot in time and a brief history of the illness at the sow farm. We're asking what the caretaker wants to do. In this case, he's still ambulatory, still walking around, obviously poor body condition. If we say maybe we want to euthanize him immediately, what's important to note here is that we're providing information about his body condition and saying he may benefit from additional evaluation. What's really important is we're not saying euthanasia is wrong straight out. Again, when it's not a clearly defined criteria under CSIA, we're not making any specific recommendations. Only when it meets those specific criteria do we make a definitive answer. In this case, we say that euthanasia may not be necessary at this point. Not saying don't do it, just saying, maybe you can consider other options. If we choose treat the pig, again, we see that we're talking about with the farm manager or veterinarian, giving a recommendation to separate him into a hospital pen. Here's an example where we have multiple correct options. So we're directed back, select the final option, and we're highlighting the reasons why this would be a good option. So we're saying specifically that monitoring can provide any further information about any further loss in body condition. And again, that a hospital pen may help him access feed and water more readily. The feedback says that we've got all the options and we're ready to continue. I'm not sure if our volume just lost itself. I think I can just tell you what it would say. So the audio here says that we're following this pig several weeks later. We see that he has now a body condition score of 3 after you separated him into the hospital pen and allowed him to continue to recover from the illness. I really like the case studies where we're providing a long-term follow-up because it's something that further reinforces the correctness of the decision not to euthanize, and we're providing kind of more positive reinforcement to the learner. That's the completion of case study 4. There's a really wide variety of topics we cover. In one case, the sow dies. In one case, we're focusing on hernias and we're talking more about reasons why specific hernias would form. We have cases that are very minor, such as a laceration, a wide variety. Okay. So associated with the program is a completion checklist. Now this is separate from the actual program itself, but it's still contained within the massive material, in which case you can keep track of an employee's completion of each case study if you prefer this over doing individual completion certificates for each case study. So thinking about developing this program, the next step is really validating that it works. So we sought a lot of feedback throughout the development process with both caretakers on various different farms, academics, others who don't really know much about pigs but focus more on learning theory. But ultimately it comes down to how does this actually function on the farm. So we had some pre and post tests that evaluated the caretaker's intention to change their behavior or their actions after receiving this training, how satisfied they were with the program, and then how much knowledge they acquired completing the program. It was evaluated by about 80 caretakers. Definitely not a representative sample across the whole country, but it was a good start at least. Those results are still forthcoming and will be published probably in the next year, hopefully. So what is really great, and I also just recently learned about this, is that this Euthanasia Timely tool, it's called, is one of 12 separate modules that are going to be either located on a USB flash drive that can be mailed out or online. These are still in development. Sarah can answer more questions if you're specifically interested. But what's great is that this Timely tool is only one of 12. So the first module, and the others are all just plain videos, they're not interactive, but still great. We provide an introduction and overview of why euthanasia is important and kind of the current state of the swine industry with regards to timely euthanasia. The next is our timely tools, so what you have just seen. After we tell the user why euthanasia is important, we're going to give you the skills to identify the pigs and make an actual decision about euthanasia. Really critical point, and another point that can lead to automatic audit failure, is confirming insensibility and death. So that's a really important criteria, not only for the animal's welfare, but also for the purposes of the audit. The next 4th through 9th modules all focus on 5 different methods, so getting more into the nitty-gritty of the technicalities of euthanizing different size pigs in different situations. The 10th and 11th modules focus on more unique situations, so a case of a non-ambulatory pig and the specific unique circumstances that may present, and then restraint during the procedure. The last part is an euthanasia action plan, which is great not only to reduce subjectivity amongst caretakers on a single farm, but also to highlight the primary and the backup methods of euthanasia that should be used on a farm for any given size of pig that is there. With that, I would like to acknowledge Pork Chekhov actually funded this project. My co-investigators, these are all fabulous professors located at universities across the world, actually, and in Ohio State for their funding and support.